Welcome to County Fair on Waycross Community Media. On this program, we look at things that are going on in Hamilton County. On November 11th, the world celebrated the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. The First World War was fought between 1914 and 1918 between the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire, and the Allied Powers, Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, Romania, Japan, and the United States. This war took the lives of more than 9 million soldiers. This war changed the map of Europe. This was the first modern war to use machine guns and tanks and air combat, as well as radio communications. And when we read about this war in our history books, it's often difficult to connect with the faraway locations and names. The Great War impacted the entire world, and our corner of the world here in Hamilton County was no exception. The main branch of Hamilton County Library has displayed from their own archives an exhibit to help us put faces to this long ago history. Over here and over there, Cincinnatians Fight the Great War features photographs, propaganda posters, newspaper accounts, and uniforms from the main library's collection. Reference librarian Jim Manger took some time to talk to us about the exhibit.
Hi, my name is Jim Manger. I'm a reference librarian with the Cincinnati Public Library, and I want to talk about the exhibit that we're showing here, which is called Over Here and Over There, Cincinnatians Fight the Great War. And this exhibit is a collection of objects that our library actually has in its rare collections, which are part of the Cincinnati Room. And the exhibit itself is being shown in the Cincinnati Room. There are a number of objects and documents and pictures and scrapbooks and other things which the library collected while the war was going on. In many ways, Cincinnati Public Library was a part of the home front and did a lot of things to bolster morale, to promote war gardens, which later became the Liberty Gardens, to promote observance of the servicemen, of service by the different local individuals. So there's a lot of collections of the names of Cincinnatians who served in the war, who participated in some way or another. Also memorials of those who died in service, and also many, many pictures of individuals who served in the war, as well as those individuals who passed away during the war. We have imagery about what was going on in the home front with regard, as I mentioned, the war gardens, but there's also the Liberty Loan promotions where they're trying to encourage people to help pay for the war by voluntary contributions. In some ways for people, this became the way that an ordinary person who wasn't called to service, in military service, could actually directly help the war effort. And many Cincinnatians and many Americans are very patriotic, use that as an opportunity to do that. There are many people who contributed to the Red Cross, which actually had a huge impact during the war, overseas and in the local area. The YMCA, the YWCA, and even the public library collected books for the troops to be sent over there, or here if they were stationed in the US. So it was just a massive effort by many involved citizens, and I wanted the exhibit to show that, to show how Cincinnatians were this group of, back then were this group of very caring people who wanted this effort by their country to succeed, and that the people who were involved in the active service were taken care of in the best way that they could be taken care of. I have a little section of what I call creative works by the troops. And one of them is, it's not by the troops, but it's by two newspaper reporters who wrote, who were observers with a regiment, what was called the 37th Division, which was called the Buckeye Division because it was based on the Ohio National Guard. And these two observers drew these cartoons and provided commentary on the various scenes that they were seeing. And some of them are, of course, very amusing, and others were more somber and more touching. But it's a really wonderful effort. And there's another piece in there of a group. The troops would actually go and create little shows that they would put on because they had people who could sing and perform, so they did that. So those are my favorite parts of the exhibit. And of course, I love all the pictures, all the images of the soldiers and sailors and Marines. It was really, it kind of moved me to create it, you know, how, you know, powerful, you know, the creativity and also the caring that people had at that time.
At the beginning of the war, the United States remained neutral. However, when German U-boats sank the British ocean liner Lusitania, which had American passengers on board, and then sank more U.S. merchant ships, Woodrow Wilson called for a declaration of war against Germany on April 2nd, 1917. This had an impact on the very largely German population here in Cincinnati.
I do have a cautionary thing in there too, which is, of course, the suppression of German culture in the United States as well. Cincinnati had such a huge German culture, and many Cincinnatians had some type of German heritage, actually more than half did. And in some ways, the war kind of, because it was against a German-speaking country, it kind of cut the ground out from underneath that of a fairly unique kind of, sort of something that made Cincinnati kind of unique in a way. And in a sense, we still think of Cincinnati as having that German culture, but I think it could have been a much richer thing if this kind of repression during the war had not taken place. So I do have that material in there as well. And I mentioned the library being this promoter of, you know, the war effort in some ways, but they also, you know, they colluded with the anti-German stuff, and they actually put the German language books in the basement out of public view. So that's a bit of censorship there, but they also protected those books from people who might have been, you know, more willing to take direct action against them, because there was a lot of passion and a lot of anger, and I think that's reflected somewhat in the exhibit as well. The exhibit on the third floor is really focused on Cincinnatians, and not just, you know, certainly about the people who served in the military and in the war, but also about what the ordinary citizen did here. So the home front is certainly a very important part of what I have focused there.
Now, the faraway battles that Hamilton County residents read about in their newspapers included young men from their own neighborhoods. Cincinnati librarians chronicled the home front by compiling scrapbooks of newspaper clippings. Now, 100 years later, we can peek into those scrapbooks as part of this exhibit. Dead soldier called bride on telephone. For 5 months, she thought he was dead. Government insisted. A mistake persisted in by the federal government since last November increased the joy at 516 West 7th Street Wednesday evening when an officially dead soldier arrived home and was greeted by his bride. First in the Middle West so highly honored is a Cincinnati girl with a first-grade federal wireless license, considered not unlikely that she will serve abroad. Miss Louise Phillips Freeman is the first girl of the Middle West to be granted wireless license. It is considered possible that Miss Freeman may be able to enter active service abroad. Several years ago, she began a course of training to fit herself for aviation and had acquired considerable skill when this plan was abandoned because the government had made no provision for the entrance of women into such service. Now there's something I can do, and I surely want to do it quick, said Cincinnati's first girl of the Radio Corps. One of the treasures of this exhibit is the typed diary of Norwood resident Lieutenant Charles Salarius. Monday, November 11th, 1918. La guerre est finie. That is the cry everywhere today. Peace was signed at 6 a.m., but we didn't get the news here until noon. Soon the flags began to appear, and in a couple of hours the city was gay with the Allied colors, the tricolor of France and the Star-Spangled Banner being the most conspicuous. We don't see much of the English Jack, but everywhere it is Vive l'Amérique. You'll find this exhibit in the Cincinnati room on the 3rd floor, which is a wonderful place where you can request to see all kinds of items stored in the library's archives. After you explore the artifacts the library included in this exhibit, a trip to their website will uncover more of the stories of how Hamilton County residents became part of the history of World War I. After reading the article about Miss Louise Freeman, I was able to use their website to access early Cincinnati Enquirer newspapers and see what else they had printed on her. I discovered that she had applied for a passport to do radio work for General Electric in England after the war in 1919. In 1929, they printed a lengthy engagement notice that gave a glimpse into her socialite family. And the notice reports that Miss Freeman has had every advantage of education and travel, but does not mention her Radio Corps achievement at all. Her beau, in case you're wondering, was a Polish young man who had served as an officer of the light artillery during the World War. The notice stresses that he came from a properly aristocratic family, making him a proper cosmopolitan that he is conceded to be. Another peek into the Enquirer's archives through the library's website gave me information about Charles Salarius, whose diary we had seen in the exhibit. In 1919, an article reports that after serving in France as the town major of Vaudonville, he was one of 5 officers in the American Expeditionary Forces to be assigned to the Architectural Department of the Army Educational Commission. Salarius thought that his Yale and MIT work might have been what made his application to the commission stand out from the 500 letters they'd received. So he was part of the educating all of the soldiers that was going on in France right after World War I. Now he then continued to make an impact here in Cincinnati because throughout his life he designed many of the homes that we can still see around us in Cincinnati. And throughout the 1950s and 60s, through these archives, you can find many articles listing Charles Salarius as the architect of notable homes that they're profiling for the newspaper. If you make it down to the main library before November 30th, you'll have a chance to see a few extra World War I exhibits on display temporarily on the 1st floor. The Over Here and Over There, Cincinnatians Fight the Great War exhibit on the 3rd floor in the Cincinnati room will remain through January 27th of 2019. So you have plenty of time to see that one before that one's put away.
I do want to say that doing this exhibit for me was really eye-opening and really moving, and just handling the materials, the uniforms and the lists and the photographs kind of takes you back into that era, and you begin to see, you know, these people from the past not just as abstractions or people in black and white photographs way back then, but you see them as real people. And I think that's always in some ways what you do when you start looking at the past and start in a sort of in close way. But this exhibit for me was a great labor of love because I could engage in that and be enlightened and inspired by that.
Thank you for joining us on Waycross Community Media's County Fair. See you next month for more of what's going on in Hamilton County.